A swim this morning in the Thames at Henley. But these days, wild swimming is about science as much as nature. Recent E. coli test results shared among river regulars suggest this is a day to keep heads above water. It's also the day the government announced commitments to halve sewage outflows and upgrade water infrastructure.
The government loves to make big claims and it loves to throw big numbers around, but when we scratch beneath the surface, the numbers don't always stack up. So last year there were 3.6 million hours of sewage discharges in England and Wales. So to halve that number by 2030 just takes us back to 2022 levels, which were considered to be crisis levels at the time.
The announcement today includes pledges to halve the number of sewage overflow incidents within 5 years, use £104 billion of private money to replace crumbling pipes and improve treatment plants, work towards banning wet wipes that contain plastic, and a threat to jail water executives who cover up sewage spills. But activists say pollution reduction should be measured by what's in the water, not the number of individual spills, and that much of this announcement, coming a day ahead of a major review of the industry as published, had already been set in train by the previous government. You're having to come out today and say something to get ahead of that report.
Nope. The previous government did not make sure the money was spent in the way it should have been. So we had water companies that were committing to upgrade their sewage pipes and they didn't. They were allowed to divert money to be spent on multi-million-pound undeserved bonuses and on dividends.
What about the role of the regulator Ofwat? Is that now in question?
Regulation and the regulator is clearly not right. Now I'm going to receive a report tomorrow morning from Sir John Cunliffe. He will make recommendations and I will respond to that. But I'm under no illusion we need a revolution in our water sector to reform it from top to bottom.
That, he says, will require further steady rises in consumer bills in the coming years, though not on the level of this year's 26% average hike. But with serious pollution incidents up 60% in England last year, some, including Reform leader Nigel Farage and many clean water activists, are calling for some form of nationalisation, something the government excluded from the remit of tomorrow's report and is also opposed by the Conservatives.
I don't think that's the solution. It'll mean a chancellor's got to choose between repairing a sewage system that's going to cost hundreds of billions of pounds or building hospitals and schools. I don't think that's the right kind of choice. And even if you were going to do that, you're going to need private capital, which is going to cost you money. People don't lend you money and not expect a return on it.
I suppose it saves having a vote.
But the actions of the private companies continue to attract controversy. Days ago, Southern Water doubled its CEO's salary to £1.4 million after it was banned from paying bonuses. Southern said this was part of a long-term incentive plan that followed regulatory rules. Rules that could well change in the aftermath of tomorrow's water industry review.
Well, here with me now we have Professor Becky Mulby here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. You're the chair of Ilkley Clean River Group. Thank you for joining us. Now, I just wanted your reaction to what we've heard from the Environment Secretary today and how big a difference you'll think it will make.
Actually, I think it'll make very little difference, Aisha, because, as it happens, most of the transformative changes that he's announced are things that have been in the pipeline for years. And the one thing that he refused to do with the Cunliffe Commission that comes out tomorrow is allow them to look at public ownership, other models of owning our water industry. So at the moment, we have a whole load of scaremongering going on. You've just heard it about the phenomenal costs to the public if we were going to transfer into public ownership. The privatised system is too expensive. It is cheaper in public ownership. We will get cleaner water and it'll be fairer for the public.
Just on that, I know you've got your own commission, I've got it here, you've got it there. You've called for public ownership, but we've seen estimates that are around 50 to 100 billion pounds. How would the government, realistically, the public, be able to afford that?
So those are false statements, Aisha. So that sort of 100 billion pounds, let's just have a look at it. It's based on the value, apparently, of the water industry as it stands. So if you were going to put a new roof on your house, it might cost you £10,000.
Right. These are government figures, though, that they are coming up with to say, and that's their argument, to say that that's why they're not going to nationalise.
And I'm just trying to explain that they're based on something called regulatory capital value, which is every time you put money into the water industry, their value goes up by the same amount. Every time you, like with a house, if you put £10,000 onto your roof, your house doesn't go up by £10,000. So Thames' regulatory value is £20 billion. It can't even sell it for £4 billion at the moment to KKR, who've pulled out. So even at market value, it's a lot less than that. That £100 billion is based on something for pricing. It's not the value. And even if you took it into special administration for public ownership, you would look at its insolvency, its poor record, the fact that it has taken out more money than it has put in, and you would expect a fair value assessment through special administration to say it is worth almost zero. We would be asking the creditors and would be requiring the creditors to take a massive haircut. Once you've done that, the 50% of some of our bills that are being spent on debt will be wiped.
I just have to put a point to you from, we don't have a representative from the water company, unfortunately. They would probably say you need to let people make profit so that they can reinvest. And they would also say nationalising other industry has been ineffective in the past. And what you could end up with is higher bills.
So if you look across the world, 90% of the water sector across the world is now in public ownership because it is a vital service. It's not just some consumer thing we can do and choose to have, Aisha. It's critical for life. So actually, if you're looking at whether it's going to be more expensive or less expensive, our root and branch review that did look at all the evidence from a non-partisan perspective found that it's cheaper in public ownership because you're not paying the debt. Any debt you need is at 4.5%. Currently, they're borrowing it between 10 and 12%.
Can I just ask you about the leader of Reform UK today suggested a 50-50 private and public ownership model. Is that a better model and one that you would support?
You can't regulate the privatised system. The government's about to go for the sort of neck and scalp of Ofwat as a way of passing some sop to change. But the reality is you can't find out what's going on in the water sector, as we know. It's the public that has managed to find out what's going on and has brought this to everybody's attention. It wasn't Ofwat because it couldn't get it. So if you're going to say that the only way we can have is through a privatised system with some sort of regulator, you're going to have the equivalent of Ofwat running around internationally trying to find where our money's gone, because our water industry is owned overseas, not in this country.
OK, Professor Becky Malby, we'll have to leave it there. I know you're very impassioned and I'm sure we'll hear more again tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming in.